I've just read One Piece chapter 1107. I'm decided to split up the little discussion and analysis section I usually put at the end of the reactions and make it two separate videos. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I thought were pretty important and shocking to me in this chapter. And I think we're just going to start from the top and go down. So the first thing that I thought was very interesting is this emphasis on Usopp when the Giants come, right? Everyone in the One Piece fandom is that is putting their stocks into Usopp. Always says wait till Elbaf. I'm one of those people. Wait till Elbaf, right? It has to be his arc. I think there was this kind of small idea in the back of our minds though that maybe we wouldn't. Well, at first we thought maybe we wouldn't even go to Elbaf. Now that we know that's gonna happen, a lot of us thought, what if it's not going to be Usopp's arc? What if we don't have time to flesh out another Straw Hat even further than we already have because there's so much we need to fit in the end of the story? I think just Oda putting Usopp subtly in this chapter, just his reactions alone and his, oh, I was worried we weren't going to see them on Elbaf in here, despite the action-packed Elbaf or Egghead that's happening. Like, what I'm saying is him taking the panel space to put in Usopp's reaction here really makes me confident that we're going to see Usopp and the Giants and some kind of power-up character progression. Some people even think a death to Usopp. I just think this is further pushing the Usopp and Elbaf connection. I think that's definitely going to happen now. It's like, it was sort of confirmed when the Giants were mentioned at the beginning of the arc. It was definitely like being pushed when the Giants showed up last chapter. And now after this, I can almost say with 100% confidence that Usopp will have an extreme relevance in Elbaf. But despite that, that was like one of the least interesting things about this chapter. There was, some crazy stuff. First, I guess we'll start at this little spot where Oda tries to like justify how the Giants found Egghead and the conflict happening. Because a lot of people thought, how the hell did the Giants come to Egghead? Like, this is all happening the same day. There's kind of like a plot hole there, but establishing that like the news is already made for this Egghead incident kind of justifies that. So I'm happy he included that as well. Next, this interaction between Lucci and Zoro is pretty interesting. I think, obviously power scaling in One Piece can be pretty toxic, but it is important to the story. And I think it's very interesting to me that this fight is still going on. It's kind of unclear how much time has passed in the arc so far. So you can't really tell if this has been going on for an hour or like they've just been scrapping with each other for a few minutes. But I do think Zoro should have wrapped this up already. And I'll be honest, when he said it's time to wrap this up, I was expecting him to just like cut Lucci and end it right there. But to me, it looks like this is even footing and they're like going, they're boxing one-on-one here. There was no real progression for this specific instance of Egghead. Like, we knew Jinbei was going over there. We still see him traveling to Zoro. I don't really know why that was included. And there wasn't really any advancement to, like, this clash that I'm seeing is, like, pretty much exactly what we saw the last time we saw Lucci and Zoro. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't understand Oda's choice to include these two in this chapter, other than to just remind us that they're fighting or just show a different perspective of Egghead, because there was no plot advancement for this fight other than Oda's portrayal that they are evenly fighting each other. Which, like I said before, I didn't expect. I thought Zoro would just wipe the floor with him. So that's pretty interesting. But moving on, the next interesting thing is this with Bonnie and Nika. I think something monumental in this interaction that a lot of people might not notice because it's kind of just like one speech bubble is Luffy not knowing what Nika means. In the same vein, it is the same thing that happened in the Kaido fight where Kaido asks him, "Who are you?" And he says, "I am Monkey D. Luffy." Oda trying to like quell the worry from the readers that this is some kind of reincarnation jargon, right? And not many people like that trope in media. I think this is again reinforcing the fact that to Luffy, from his perspective, he is just fighting free. This is not him tapping into some like ancient being or power. It is just another step of the Gum Gum Fruit for him, which I think is really great for his character. I think it fits really well for him to not understand the weight of what he is and just continue to fight to protect his friends. Which is just so Luffy, which is why Oda also includes that here, where he says, "You're gonna pay for hurting my friends." Um, Huge for Bonnie for Straw Hat Stocks saying, "I've been looking for you for so long. I was blah 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 blah." Like the likelihood of Bonnie joining the Straw Hats has just climbed and climbed and climbed as the Egghead incident has gone on. But surprisingly, I think I'm gonna take my first ever stance against Bonnie joining the Straw Hats. I want her to join. I think it would be cool, but I'm kind of seeing a reflection in what Yamato was in Wano, where, let me just get this off my chest immediately. Bonnie is an infinitely better character than Yamato. Yamato did not even have a character arc. It started her character arc at the end of Wano, so I did not see any reason for her to join. But in her resemblance to Bonnie is that both had this kind of obvious, like, oh, they're gonna join the crew. Oda made it very obvious that Yamato had wanted to join. Like, she explicitly stated, she, he, they, don't want to cause any controversy. Yamato explicitly stated that Yamato wanted to join the Straw Hats, and then Oda, in a very basic writing maneuver, subverses our expectations, and Yamato ends up not joining the Straw Hats. That almost feels like what is happening with Bonnie here. I was expecting at the end of the arc for there to be like this whole understanding of Bonnie's character, understanding that her character arc is not completed until she helps take down the world government that destroyed her father, and she can only do that by joining the Straw Hats. I still think that is possible, but this was the first hint that maybe she won't join because Oda is making it kind of so obvious that there's a connection there, and there will be some kind of, again, subversion of expectation for her to not join. But again, that's just an inkling of my thought. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm overthinking it, so we'll see. Next up in this little interaction here is Saturn using this, still to this day, unnamed ability where he like gleams hockey from his eyes and hits people. It works on Luffy, but then we scroll down here and he just looks unaffected, right? So like, and it didn't push him to like the ground as it did the other people that he used it on. So maybe it has to do with the level of the character's hockey or something like that. I still am unclear what it is. But regardless, this attack from Luffy is really cool. What's even more interesting to me is because this gleam attack didn't work on Luffy, I was expecting Luffy's attack to maybe perhaps work on Saturn, because none of the previous attacks landed on Saturn worked. He just regenerated, right? But all those characters who attacked him previously also fell subject to this gleam attack. So I kind of thought maybe Luffy's attack would actually do something because he's a level above, as portrayed in this chapter. Doesn't feel like it. It feels like, it's further down. We'll come back and look at some of this stuff, but it feels like he is completely fine and regenerated again. So that leads me to believe this Devil Fruit is either insanely overpowered and he's like has the most insane regenerative power ever, or it's not a Devil Fruit in the first place. He's like a certain race. But another facet of this chapter leads me to believe that I'm incorrect in that. It is a Devil Fruit. We'll get to that in a second. First, I want to talk about Vegapunk. So I did make a short video about why I think Vegapunk is going to die. Like, this is his death. It's not a fake out. If you want further in depth, you can go watch that short. But just to sum it up, I think Oda only kills characters when their character conclusion and their purpose as a character is finished, and I think Vegapunk has served his purpose. So I think them kind of leaving him here reinforces that fact. Like, I think he's not going to make it in the end. That's just my guess. It's One Piece. Who knows? But it leads to this fantastic moment where Sanji finally, like, we've been theorizing forever that Sanji or Zoro would fight an admiral, and he is blocking Kizaru's attack, and just it feels so good, right? The writing strength of One Piece is seeing these characters that have been built up by Oda have reactions to the growth of the main characters that the spotlight is on, and seeing Kizaru himself be surprised that Sanji, a character who he almost killed in Sabaody, is standing up to his laser like that with absolutely zero difficulty. That is what I love about One Piece. That reaction is just amazing. I love it. And it's about time. Like, we've wanted to see Sanji shine against someone who's like kind of similar battle. You know, like they both have like the speed, right? Seeing him come and protect Bonnie here is just amazing. Light doesn't hold the candle to love is such a cold line too. I love it. And that leads us to this, which in my chapter reaction I kind of paused and took a glance at, because I am a sucker for team battles, and it for a second where Kizaru is saying they expect me to bring back your heads, and he's just standing in front of Luffy and Sanji. Um, I so desperately wanted this chapter to evolve into a tag team fight. I think there is a lack of that in One Piece, and oh my god, it would be so cool to see Luffy and Sanji fight together. Maybe we'll get that next chapter. I don't know, but this could be if it's Luffy versus Kizaru or Sanji versus Kizaru or both of them versus Kizaru. I'm happy either way. I think any of those is a fantastic outcome of this chapter. But I was very, very happy to see Sanji get his moment and then stand here and backtalk to Kizaru with Luffy there as well. Just having them both, all three of them in the same panel, I love it. It's so great. And Kizaru like understands that he's like in a tough spot too, which is again testament to how much the Straw Hats have grown since Sabaody, and I just love seeing stuff like that. So then we get to perhaps the most interesting part of the chapter, which is finally the Blackbeard pirates step on the island. We've theorized for ages that the only person left out from the Blackbeard moments in Egghead, like Blackbeard versus Law and the whole Garp storyline, was Katarina Devon. We thought it was going to be Lafitte with Katarina Devon. It ended up being Van Augur, which is interesting because then that implies the Law thing is done and they've like moved on to Egghead already. So that kind of gives Blackbeard some availability. I don't think he's going to show up at Egghead because this, as we'll talk about in a second, this feels like this was the motive of the Blackbeard pirates. They got what they needed. And what was that? Seemingly, it was that they just wanted Devon to touch Saturn. And as we know, Devon is a shapeshifter. We don't know if she can replicate Devil Fruit's powers. Maybe we did see that she can. I don't remember. But the fact that she's touching a Gorosei member means two things to me. One, she wants the Devil Fruit, which again, like I mentioned previously, would imply that Saturn does have a Devil Fruit and he's not of a different race. But what's more important is that she obviously wants to be able to shapeshift into one of the world's greatest authorities. And that is big for me, right? For the first time in a very, very long time, not only through her actions of touching Saturn, through her words, we kind of start to understand what the Blackbeard Pirates' motive is. And that is when Saturn says, "What do you hope to get out of these stunts?" And they say, "The world." That is a cold-ass line. I am very excited to see like the Blackbeard Pirates get slowly built up as they have been, right? We've gotten very many glimpses of them in this arc. Seeing them kind of get their moment in this arc as well, and seeing Oda like slowly kind of like build up the repertoire of the Blackbeard Pirates and their motives and all their members has been really interesting. I think the eventual Luffy versus Blackbeard, Straw Hats versus Blackbeard Pirates is going to be amazing, and I think this is testament to that. What's even more interesting than that is the conversation about Blackbeard. Saturn says, "I'm surprised someone like you, Katarina Devon, would choose the life of a subordinate." She says Teach is special. We've known that. We've known Teach is special. He's a Yonko. He has 2 Devil Fruits. Extremely cunning. Knows so much about the world. What else would make him special? Well, Saturn says his lineage. We know something's up with his body from Marco's comments in Marineford. This is the first time since then we've gotten some kind of hint towards that. And they acknowledge it. They say, "Oh, so you know about that." My initial thoughts were that what race was introduced in this arc and said to us directly from Vegapunk that this race has a special ability? The Buccaneers. We learned about the Buccaneers this arc, and we learned that they have some kind of special ability that we don't know what it is. Once again, this lineage is being mentioned, and that it has some kind of special ability, right? Teach is special. This really, really, really makes me think that Blackbeard is a Buccaneer. He is of the D clan, which seems to have originated from that race. He is a history buff. He knows like a lot of the ancient history and kind of seemingly knows the direction the world is supposed to go in. It makes me really feel like, and he's from Whitebeard's crew, kind of the antithesis of Whitebeard wanting a family almost. It makes me feel like Blackbeard is going to end up being like the failed version or like the evil version of what the D-Clan and the Buccaneers were trying to accomplish, Luffy being the correct version of the Joy Boy they were waiting for, and it's going to build up to this perfect 1v1 of like the failed D-Clan moniker versus like Joy Boy, who's like the correct version of what the Buccaneers are waiting for. I think that really pushes the theory that Blackbeard is a Buccaneer. Sorry, I went on a tangent about nothing about this chapter, but that's what this made me think of. The fact that they're mentioning this lineage again, it really makes me think that Blackbeard is a Buccaneer. And lastly, Caribou. For a very long time, we've known that Caribou has been mentioning this person, right? He said it back in Fishman Island when he learned about the ancient weapons. He's like, oh, that person would be happy to know about this. A lot of people thought he was already on Blackbeard's crew, but to me, what this is making me believe is that Caribou is gathering this kind of precious information in effort to then go and give it to Blackbeard in return for joining his crew. Like, he wasn't always connected to Blackbeard as we thought. I don't really know how Devon and Van Augur are going to respond to this, but what's important out of this, I despite all of his rambling and yapping, I think the only thing that is important is that he knows about the ancient weapons, and we haven't really heard Blackbeard talk about them, so it's possible that Caribou is going to play a very integral piece in giving Blackbeard the information he's gained from the Straw Hats, and allowing Blackbeard to, like, I don't want to say catch up to Luffy, because he's like, I feel like he's ahead of Luffy almost, but almost like share that like information that Luffy has, right? Because Luffy has information about the One Piece, about the history of the world, about the ancient weapons from all the people he's met along the way, right? The Minks, the people in Wano, the people in Fishman Island. And all of this knowledge is obviously going to come together when he finds the One Piece. I think Blackbeard is lacking in that aspect is because he's a villain. He doesn't have the same connections Luffy has. He doesn't get that like friendly information that he gets. So the fact that Caribou, who by proxy and like by staying on the Straw Hats boat has all that information, is going to give it to Blackbeard, it kind of evens the playing field of the information that Blackbeard and Luffy have, which I think is the purpose of including him in this chapter. Either way, a fantastic chapter. I love the chapters like this. Is my favorite like type of chapter where it's a hybrid of like action, like we have Sanji blocking this and Luffy punching this, but you also get the reveals, right? Like the Blackbeard reveals and stuff like that. I just think it's Oda's best work, being able to weave in the world building and the story and the narrative into like cool fighting. And I think that's exactly what the chapter did. And we have no break next week. So I'm not expecting the same amount of information dump in next week's chapter. I'm kind of expecting it to be all out fighting as the climax continues, but I've said that for the last 2 chapters. So who knows? Maybe we get even more reveals. Either way, we only got to wait a week, so until then.